everyone, I'm Paula and welcome to Sew Spark Studio. You may not be able to tell from the video, but I'm actually pretty short, less than 5 feet if I'm honest with people. And so if I buy clothing, quite often I have to adjust the length. Now you might be thinking, oh, you sew, why are you buying clothing? Well, lots of reasons. Sometimes it's time, sometimes it's cost. So there are times that I do choose to purchase. Today I'm going to shorten a pair of yoga pants that I bought that are too long. This technique could also be used to shorten a t-shirt or to shorten sleeves, or if you were sewing a t-shirt, you could use this for hems as well. So join me and let's get started. As you can see, these are much too long. So the first thing I'll do is determine how much I need to shorten them. There are a couple different ways to determine how much to shorten your pants. If you have someone available, you can put them on. I would put on the shoes that I was going to wear them with and have that person pin the legs for you. This method's ideal if you happen to have one leg that's slightly longer than the other, because then each leg needs to be adjusted individually. If that's not an option, you could put the pants on and you can use a full-length mirror. You just need to be careful, because if you're twisting and looking down at the back of your pants, you are actually altering the length of the pants on your body. So perhaps a better way would be to put them on with a mirror and take a selfie, and then you can pin them up, take another selfie, and look at them from that direction and see if that works for you. And then the third method, which I'm actually going to use for these yoga pants, involves using a pair of pants that you already have that are the length that you like. So I have here a pair of yoga pants that already are the right length for me. And so I'm simply going to take a tape measure and measure the inseam, the inside pant leg, from the seam to the bottom of the pant. And I'm going to use that measurement on my new pant because they are a similar fit to this particular pair of pants. So this is the pair of pants that I want to shorten, and I'm going to measure the inseam on these pants, and I will put a pin at the point where they are the same length as the existing pants that I measured previously. And I'm just measuring the one leg, and then I'll decide how much to shorten them and adjust both of them accordingly. Start by turning the pants inside out. And then I'm looking for the pin that I put in to mark the length, and I'm going to put one on this side so that I can see it easily, and take that one out. And then I'm going to use my seam gauge to see how far that is from the edge. These pants are actually quite long for me, so I'm going to be shortening them about 5 3/8 inches or 13 centimeters approximately. What I'm going to do then is fold where that pin is. And that will be my first fold. I'll just double check the amount on that. And I'll use that pin. I'm going to pin parallel to the edge, closer to the edge, because I'm going to be trimming this extra fabric off. Now, if you prefer to use the clips, you definitely can use those. I have them, and I've used them a little bit. I have to say I've been using pins for years, and I feel like the pins are a little more secure, so I prefer not to use them. But you're definitely welcome to use the clips if that is something that you're comfortable with. But as I said, I'm going to be using my pins today for pinning this. So I'm turning this and putting pins in, keep folding it the same amount all the way around the pant leg. Then you're also going to do the other pant leg. I tried these on after I pinned them, and I'm glad that I did, because I actually have adjusted the length and I'm shortening them 4 3/8 inches, about 10.5 centimeters instead of the 5 3/8 that I had measured earlier. So now I need to determine how much I'm going to cut off because I don't want all of this extra length here. Now, if I only needed to adjust them about 2.5 centimeters or an inch, I would actually stitch rip the existing hem because I would need to open it up and trim less off. But because of the amount I'm shortening it, I don't have to take the time to do that. I can simply cut that off. And this particular hem, if I measure it, is about 3/4 of an inch or 2 centimeters. And so I'm going to cut off so that I have about that amount remaining here. Now, how am I going to do that? Well, I'm going to adjust my seam gauge so it's at about 3/4 of an inch, 2 centimeters. I've got a chalk pencil. I could mark with that. What I find though is that chalk pencils in particular don't mark easily on synthetics that are knit fabrics. So this is not my preferred method for that. I've got another form of chalk that's in a block. This one might mark more easily, but again, it's kind of bulky and a wider mark. It's not as distinct, and so that's not ideal either. This is a chalk liner, and there's chalk in the reservoir here. This one is white. I only have one of them. They're a little expensive. This one actually makes a very clear mark. And so I could measure all the way around and mark it and then come back and cut on that line. Now the chalk does rub off quite easily, but it would stay on there long enough for me to use it. So any of these, if they make a clear enough mark, work. But I like to shortcut, and I'm confident enough in my ability to do this that I actually don't mark it. I use my seam gauge, I take my shears, and I cut. Let's come a little closer here to where I'm cutting. And then I just aim my shears at the marker on the seam gauge, and that is my guide for trimming them. But if you feel a little insecure about cutting and measuring at the same time, you might want to mark that line with chalk or whatever method works for you. So you're going to trim both pant legs the same amount. And you can save the pieces for testing the sewing machine stitching before you sew them. So we're at the machine, and this is the piece that I cut off from the pant leg earlier. And you can see there's 2 rows of stitching on the hem here. And this is the way that most knits are hemmed when they're done in the fashion industry. And if you look at the back of it, you can see it's got kind of this zigzag look here. And this is done with a specialized machine called a cover lock. You can buy cover locks for your home, but I don't happen to have one. So I'm going to show you what you can do with your regular sewing machine. But my preferred method of stitching is to use the twin needle, because that's going to give me a result that is closest to what the original hem was like without having an actual cover stitch. Twin needles come in a variety of sizes, and I've got 3 different ones here. Some of the narrower ones are used for more decorative sewing, like pin tucks. For the hem that I'm doing, I want something wider than that. So this one is 4 millimeters. And the needle size is 75, which also works well on this particular synthetic material. I've happened to choose a stretch needle, but you might be able to get away with a universal twin needle as well. So I'm going to change my stitch length. For this, I'm going to do 2.8. Now, I was playing around with this earlier, and I thought the tension was a little bit too tight for it. So what I'm going to do is adjust my tension. It's set on 4. I'm going to turn it down 1 point and turn it to 3. So I'm going to test on the same scrap of fabric that I've cut from the bottom of the pant legs. I'm sewing from the right side. I'm going to be lining up on just a little bit more than 5/8, just a little more than 1.5 or almost to 3/4, but not quite. And that looks pretty good. Now, if you look at the back of it, you can see that you get this kind of zigzag effect because there's only one bobbin thread. So it's sort of similar to what a cover lock would do, but not exactly the same. But it does do a good job of duplicating the look. So I've tested the stitching, adjusted my tension, and we're ready to sew. Now, if you happen to have a free arm machine where you can take off the front part of your machine and have an arm that is free, I would turn these pants right side out and I would put them over the free arm and stitch around that way. However, my machine does not have a free arm, so I'm leaving the pants wrong side out, and I would also do this if I was making leggings that were too small to fit over a free arm. You'll notice that I've adjusted my pins to right angles, and that's simply because they're easier to take out as I'm stitching around the pant. So I'm going to start at one of the seams. And I am not going to backstitch with the twin needle. Now you can backstitch with it, but what I've found in the past is that the backstitching tends to come out more easily than if I'm just sewing with a single needle. And so I am going to hand knot my stitches when I'm done rather than trying to backstitch. I've got this 3/4 inch or 2 centimeter fold here, and I'm sewing on the right side so I can't see the folded edge. I don't want to sew right at 2 centimeters because I want to make sure I catch it. I'm going to sew a little bit less than 2 centimeters, a little bit more than 1.5. So a little less than 3/4 of an inch, a little bit more than 5/8 of an inch. And so press our foot down, we'll take out that first pin. And I don't need to stretch because with the twin needle, the way the bobbin thread zigzags in the back automatically builds in stretch. And just a little overlap where I started. And I'm going to leave fairly long tails because I'm going to pull those to the back and knot them. But I'm going to stitch the other pant leg first. So I have a needle with a large hole just to make this easier. It's actually a crewel needle, which means that the tip is not perfectly sharp, but it will go through the fabric that these pants are made out of. So I'm threading 2 of the threads from the right side through the needle. And then just pull them through to the back side. And I'll do the same with the other 2. And then on the back, I'll show you how to do a loop knot. I'm going to use all the threads at the same time for this one. So to do the loop, sometimes it's challenging to get the loop right close to the fabric. It ends up out here instead of where you want it. So I'm going to put a pin where I want the loop to end up. And I'm going to do the loop around the pin. And then when you pull on it, it will actually pull the threads so that they are close to the fabric, and then you can just take your pin out. Now I do this as well. I usually double knot this. I do this without a pin, but practice, right? And I use my thumbnail to pull it so that it's right close to the fabric. But the pin is a little trick if you're having difficulty with that. And then trim your threads, and that's all done. When you're done, to give it a more finished look, you want to press your hem. So I've got these right side out, but I'm actually going to push back the top and press from the inside. I'm going to be using a press cloth. This is a piece of cotton muslin, and I'm doing that because this is a synthetic fabric, and you cannot use a very high heat on these or they will melt. But I want enough heat so that I'm actually going to make a difference when I press it. So I'm going to use a wool setting on my iron, and just to make sure I don't melt my fabric, I'm going to use the press cloth so that it will protect the fabric. And I've got a little bit of moisture on the press cloth, and that extra moisture is going to help to press this edge nice and flat when I press with the iron. And it's important when you're pressing to use an up and down kind of motion. Often I will just sit the iron right on it, but with this fabric, again, I'm not going to do that for very long. This is what we call pressing, as opposed to the back and forth you might do when you're ironing. And so do the same thing to each leg. So here's our pants, all hemmed and ready to go.